When a deadly infection breaks out, ordinary people are trapped in places they cannot escape. Across both quarantine movies, the virus spreads from a sealed apartment building to a plane forced into lockdown, turning victims violent and leaving survivors with almost no way out. This is both quarantine movies recapped. Enjoy. Quarantine begins on the evening of March 11, 2008, when a news reporter named Angela Vidal and her cameraman Scott Percival are covering the night shift at the Los Angeles Fire Department to document what an ordinary night looks like for firefighters. She excitedly watches the fire trucks head out and wishes they had come earlier so she could go with them, but decides to wait for them to return. She interviews the department captain named Bob, who explains that most of the calls they get are from people who need medical assistance. She wonders if firefighters slide down the poles, so Bob lets her try it. He then takes her to the dining hall to introduce her to Jake and George Fletcher, explaining that Angela will be shadowing them for her report. Once they finish eating, Angela hands them the microphones, telling them to be careful, as the camera will be recording them for the rest of the night, and her station doesn't allow any curse words. They show her the hook ladder, a tool that was used in the past to get into multi-story buildings. They also introduce her to their dog Wilshire, who shows them how to stop, drop, and roll, as he is trained to help people do that in case they catch fire. After that, Jake explains that because they have 48-hour shifts, they have gyms and recreation rooms, and Angela wishes they'd get a call so she can show her viewers some action. They head to the locker room, where Angela claims that she can do everything better than them, so she and Fletcher bet to see who gets dressed into the firefighter's suit better, and Angela wins, prompting Jake to make fun of Fletcher. Later, they play basketball, and after that, Angela covers the nighttime routine, where firefighters take turns sleeping, so they can take quick action in case of an emergency. Suddenly, the alarm rings, and Jake tells Angela that her wish has been granted, so they quickly get inside the truck. On the way, Angela explains that she always wanted to be a firefighter when she was young, and she is excited to finally play out her dream. Upon arrival at the scene, Jake gathers the tools that will be required to break a lock, while the rest meet the landlord Yuri Ivanov, who called for help, and Yuri escorts them inside the building. Angela notices a police car and comments that it might be more serious than they initially thought. Jake tries to reassure her not to worry, but the building's residents quickly surround them, saying that a resident named Mrs. Espinoza was screaming hysterically. The police officers named James and Danny take them to the apartment, warning Scott that he will have to turn off the camera in case it is something serious. They knock on the door, urging the woman to open it, but eventually break it down. Espinoza is crying inside, so Scott turns on the flashlight of his camera, which makes her scream, and the police push him away. James orders Danny to get everyone out of the apartment, but suddenly Espinoza jumps on James and bites his neck. They quickly get Espinoza off of him and rush James downstairs, while Angela orders Scott to film everything. But they realize that the main door has been closed from the outside. A resident named Lawrence reveals that he is a vet and wraps a rag around James's wound. Danny tries to reach out to the station to request backup but gets no response. Suddenly, an announcement reveals that the authorities are trying to get them out of the building, while Danny angrily orders Scott to turn off the camera, and Angela claims that they have the right to film, so Danny should be worried about getting people out of the building. Jake urges them to stop fighting and asks Yuri to take him to the back door. But Fletcher falls from the upper floor with a bite on his neck, so Jake quickly checks his pulse before calling Lawrence for help. Angela and Scott decide to head upstairs to check where the noise is coming from and eventually reach Espinosa's apartment. Angela stops Scott, but he doesn't listen and heads inside, where a woman rushes towards them but falls down suddenly. Jake quickly checks her pulse and reveals that she has died, making Danny urge Scott and Angela to head downstairs. However, before they go, Espinosa comes in front of them, making Danny order her to put her hands up, but she runs towards them, so Danny shoots her. Jake stops Danny from trying to shut off Scott's camera, while Angela stands frozen before she demands that Scott show her the footage, violently snatching the camera. When he refuses to do so, a woman named Sadie comes out, and Angela comforts her while taking her down to the atrium. Later, Jake goes from door to door asking a man named Randy to leave his apartment, but he refuses as he doesn't consider it a threat. Jake forces him and heads to another couple named Jawahir and Nadif, who do not understand English but follow the signs. After that, he heads to another apartment and finds an unresponsive woman named Elise Jackson there, so he assumes she is sick and asks Angela to help her get downstairs. Elise vomits on the way and a rat runs towards Scott, causing him to stomp on it. The residents worry upon seeing Elise and explain that Fletcher is bleeding badly. Angela reports on the camera that 2 people have died, while 2 are in serious need of medical care, but the police have blocked all exits. They find armed police standing on the back door, ordering them to stay away or they will open fire. The residents try to call their family, but they have no signal, and Jake gets a notification from the department claiming that the authorities have declared the building a biohazard, which makes all tenants panic. Yuri informs Jake and Angela that there is an overhang on the 2nd floor that can be used to jump to the patio, and takes them there. He asks Angela to jump down, but just as they approach the window, armed officials point their guns at them, asking them to stay back and seal the window despite Angela's pleas. Danny shows up, making Angela push him in anger as she wonders why he isn't helping them escape. Jake also gets aggressive, making Danny pull his gun and order all of them to head back to the lobby. Jake calms him down and Danny explains that he also doesn't know what is going on, so they all apologize. Later, Angela interviews Lawrence, who is tending to the injured, and he explains that they have lost a lot of blood while Fletcher has multiple broken bones. He reveals that he finds it hard to believe an elderly woman like Espinosa can cause such serious damage. Angela next interviews a 5-year-old girl named Brianna, who states that she lives with her mom, dad, and her dog. She mentions that her father took the dog to the vet because it was sick, and that she herself has been sick for a few weeks. Angela then records Sadie, an opera student, and her roommate Bernard, an opera teacher. Suddenly, they hear screams as Fletcher stands up and starts barking, making Lawrence quickly inject anesthesia into his neck. Lawrence quickly realizes that their symptoms are similar to rabies but is confused as rabies usually takes months to show its symptoms, but these victims are showing it as soon as they are infected. He explains that it is transmitted through body fluids and it has no cure. Randy creates a scene, saying that if it can be transmitted, they should all head back to their apartments instead of sitting in a big group while Danny tries to hold him back. Angela notices that Sadie and Bernard are heading to their apartment from the fire exit stairs, but once they reach the second floor, they find a rabid dog there. Suddenly, Randy arrives and the dog mauls Randy to death. So Angela tries to help, but it is of no use. They rush into the apartment and turn on the TV, which has wireless cable, and find that the CDC is saying that they've evacuated the building. Suddenly, the power goes out, and they get attacked by Elise, so Scott hits her in the face with his camera until she dies. Scott freaks out, and Angela comforts him before they rush downstairs. There, Danny explains that the CDC is going to come in and run some blood tests to find the infected and evacuate the rest, making the residents relieved. However, Lawrence doesn't believe them, as they would need a brain sample to test rabies, which won't be possible in the building. Danny dismisses him and takes attendance, which reveals that Nadif's paralyzed father is still in his apartment, and a man from Boston rents the attic, but he hasn't been around for a few months. CDC officers wearing hazmat suits enter the building, and Scott films them by turning on the flashlight of his camera, but they force him to stop recording. They head inside the makeshift ward where the injured are and shut everyone else out, so Scott films through the vents. The CDC members handcuff Fletcher to the bed before giving him an injection and take out a drill, and use it on Fletcher's scalp to get a brain sample. Just as he takes the sample, Fletcher awakens and attacks the CDC members, making others rush out of the room and lock it. Jake orders them to pull Lawrence out, but a CDC member claims that Lawrence has been bitten. They corner the surviving CDC inspector, and he reveals that Brianna's dog is the reason the CDC has quarantined the building, as it was infected with a new type of rabies that shows symptoms within hours. Brianna's mother, Kathy, insists that Brianna only has bronchitis, but Brianna succumbs and bites her mother before fleeing. They quickly handcuff Kathy to the staircase, and the inspector hands them a syringe to inject Brianna with while ordering Danny to bring everyone in the building downstairs. The group finds Brianna, who bites Danny.
Right. I'm gonna need you to give me your hand.
Which forces the others to rush back downstairs, but they find the residents running upstairs saying that the infected have broken the glass door of the makeshift ward. They rush back up while Kathy is killed by an infected and Lawrence bites Nadif and Jawahir. The people who aren't infected yet run to an apartment, and Jake locks the door, freaking out that they've lost control of the building. Angela starts crying, saying that she can't comprehend why they are biting each other's faces off. Jake explains that they need to leave as staying in one area reduces their chances, but Angela refuses to run anymore, hysterically screaming that the authorities have left them to die. Jake hears a noise and finds that the inspector is in the same apartment, while the inspector reveals that he has been bitten. Jake quickly locks him in another room but realizes that the glass door won't hold him back. Angela notices that Sadie is infected, making Yuri claim that they have to kill her. Bernard quickly protests and attempts to escape the building, but he is killed by a sniper outside. The sniper shoots more bullets at the window, making Yuri say that their final chance is the basement, which connects to the sewers, and the key is in Yuri's apartment. However, before he can explain more, the inspector breaks the glass door and bites Yuri. Wanda refuses to leave Yuri behind and gets bitten by Sadie, while Jake, Angela, and Scott escape. The trio freaks out as they don't know Yuri's apartment number, so they rush to check the mailbox but get attacked by Nadif, whom Jake kills. They find Yuri's apartment number and rush to the elevator where they kill the rabid dog. However, just as the lift door opens, they get attacked by Sadie, who crawls over Angela before Jake strangles Sadie to death. Angela cries that she has been bitten, but Scott finds no bite on her and comforts her. They encounter Jawahir and throw her down the staircase before finally reaching Yuri's apartment, where Angela finds the key. Jake tells them that they need to rush down 3 flights of stairs, so they will have to be quick and quiet. However, just as they open the door, Jake gets bitten by Yuri and Scott realizes that the stairs are full of infected people. So the duo is forced into the attic apartment. They open the locked apartment and close it before any infected person can come in. Scott comforts her, saying that the attic was locked up so they will be safe in here for a while. But they discover that the attic has multiple lab equipment and newspaper clippings about a member of a doomsday cult that broke into a military biological facility and stole a biological weapon called the Armageddon virus, a mutated form of rabies which is highly contagious and deadly. Angela plays a recording and hears sounds of a man growling like a dog. Suddenly a trapdoor opens, making Angela scream, and Scott says he will look what is up there, but Angela refuses, claiming that she won't have the light that way. Scott insists that they have to do something and moves up to find an infected boy there, who swats the camera away, breaking the flashlight. Scott turns on the night vision and holds Angela's hand, but they hear banging noises inside the apartment. Scott warns Angela to stay quiet as the infected man searches the apartment, unable to find them because of the dark. Scott urges Angela to sneak out, but they are discovered and the man attacks Scott. While he screams for Angela to run, Angela retrieves the camera and finds the man feeding on the dead Scott, so she starts crying, which makes the infected man run in her direction. She drops the camera and thinks the man hasn't found her, but she screams as she is dragged into the darkness. Quarantine 2 terminal kicks off in Los Angeles, where 2 flight attendants named Paula and Jenny are late for their flight, so they hurriedly change into their uniforms in a taxi. They rush to the plane where the co-pilot Wilsey asks them for coffee, saying he is suffering from a cold. He comments that all the dogs in his neighborhood are sick, but Captain Forrest joins them, saying that because of the thunderstorm they won't have many passengers. Jenny heads down to meet George, a 12-year-old boy who is flying alone, but George says that he doesn't wish to be bothered. They are joined by a woman named Bev and her husband Dr. Kingston, who can't speak or move because of his Parkinson's disease. A man named Ralph enters the plane, and he notices Henry struggling to put his hamster's cage in the overhead compartment, so he tries to fit the cage in the back compartments, but the rat inside bites Ralph's finger. Jenny takes the cage from Henry and puts it in the storage while he tells her that his kindergarten students will be angry if anything happens to the hamsters. Meanwhile, a pregnant couple, Niall and Susan, clean the seats before sitting while Paula announces that the flight will be heading to Kansas City. The pilot asks the flight attendants to take their seats for the departure, and the plane takes off. Once stable, the captain turns off the seatbelt sign and allows the passengers to use their approved electronic devices. Jenny asks George if he travels alone frequently, making George reveal that he moves cities to meet his divorced parents. Suddenly, Jenny notices Niall is on a call and urges him to hang up, but Niall refuses, so Henry comes and snatches Niall's phone. Niall gets aggressive, but Jenny warns that they could be arrested when they land if they don't behave. She tells Henry that he shouldn't have intervened, so Henry apologizes and flirts with her. Jenny goes to Ralph, who isn't feeling well, and asks for water. Jenny notices that Henry is watching the news about the CDC surrounding an apartment building in LA. Just then, Jenny sees that Ralph is sitting in a weird position and goes to check on him, but he suddenly pukes all over her. He demands to get off, but the attendants tell him that it isn't possible, and Paula sends Jenny to clean herself. They don't realize that Louise's cat has escaped from her bag and is licking the vomit. When Jenny returns, Ralph aggressively attempts to enter the cockpit, so Wilsey follows protocol and locks the door, while Forrest warns ground control. Henry tries to stop Ralph, but he's easily overpowered, so the passengers eventually team up to tie up Ralph's arms and knock him out. Later, a military medic named Shyla checks the passengers for any injuries, while Jenny weeps in the crew rest compartment, telling Paula that she failed to be useful in an emergency. Suddenly, the captain announces that they've been given the orders to land, and the attendants notice that the unconscious Ralph is hitting his head against the floor, so they put him in a seat. However, because of turbulence, Paula falls over him, making him regain consciousness and bite her nose. Ralph becomes hysterical, and Henry quickly covers Ralph's face with a cloth, while the men push Ralph into the washroom, locking him up. Just as the plane lands, Shyla uses the emergency first aid kit to give Paula sedatives to prevent her from going into shock, and ties a scarf around her face. Forrest gets angry when ground control tells them to wait, and he decides to move to an unassigned gate. A baggage handler named Ed Ramirez notices them and opens the gate so the passengers can finally get off. Forrest and Wilsey hold the plane's lavatory door shut while everyone else rushes to evacuate the plane except for Bev and Kingston. As they need help, Ed leads the passengers to the gate leading into the terminal. But unfortunately it's closed, so he sends a message, but no one responds to him. Ed takes them to the employee entrance to reach the staff door, saying that it has been shut down for maintenance, but he's shocked to discover that all the doors are locked. He checks the power box and realizes that they're under lockdown, so the passengers demand Ed to do something, making him reveal that he only moves bags, which causes chaos, but they are interrupted by the sound of sirens. George rushes to the window and notices multiple ambulances and police cars outside, but the window quickly gets covered. An announcement reveals that the passengers are quarantined and they are requested to wait until help comes. The passengers call their families before they all gather around Jenny, demanding to meet the captain. Shyla interrupts them to say that Paula won't survive without proper medical care, revealing that she has a medical kit in her luggage. Jenny asks Ed if he can help her get the luggage, but Ed claims that he has a 3-year-old daughter and he will hold Jenny responsible if he gets sick. A few passengers decide to join Ed and Jenny, but the power goes out on their way to the plane, so Ed guides them with his flashlight. Eventually, Jenny heads inside the plane to find it empty, and when she opens the washroom she finds it full of blood. A passenger named Preston goes inside to get his laptop and he bumps into Kingston, who is sitting alone. So they tell Preston to keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, Ed cuts the carpet to reach the hatch that leads them to the baggage hold, where Jenny reaches for Shyla's medical kit, and Niall grabs a gun from his suitcase. Ed freaks out when he finds a rat, but Henry calms him down, saying it might have been his hamster since its cage was broken. Jenny goes outside the luggage cabin and finds blood on Preston's laptop. But before she can react, an infected Forrest appears behind Jenny and attacks her. The men rush out to help her, but Forrest overpowers them, so Niall shoots him to death. Henry asks her if she was bitten, but she tells him that she is fine, so they urge her to get off the plane. In the corridor, they find Kingston thrown from his wheelchair and an unconscious Preston bitten on the back of the neck. They check if Kingston has been bitten but find no bite on him, so they put him in the wheelchair. Jenny finds Bev crying and begging for help, but she suddenly transforms and attacks as well. Jenny runs and tries to close the door, but Bev stops her, so Henry tells her to rush to Paula while he and Ed deal with Bev. Jenny gives the medical kit to Shyla and she tries her best to save Paula. Susan wipes blood off Niall's face and the two share a kiss. Jenny zones out and George approaches her, telling her that she got a call from her father, who advised her to take charge after hearing her voicemail. Jenny heads back to find that Henry and Ed have locked Bev out by putting furniture in front of the door. However, Jenny looks at blood drops on the ground and she orders everyone to shut up, explaining that their pilot and co-pilot have turned into animals, so they have to follow her lead. She claims that the infection is spreading through bites, and Ed claims that it seems like some kind of rabies. Kingston spots a rat and tries to alert the people, but they don't notice him, and the rat falls on his head before biting him. George pushes the rat away and the guys trap the rat in a bucket. Shyla treats his wound and then they lock Kingston and Paula in a crate in case they try to attack them. After that, Ed reveals that the rat has a third leg, making it a lab rat. And George claims that he saw Henry bring in the rats. Henry explains that they were given to his students by a parent, and he was unaware that hamsters do not have tails. Jenny pulls him away and demands the truth, but he explains that lab rats won't pass the security check. As they comfort each other, Ralph comes out and jumps on Jenny while ignoring Henry's attempts to stop him. Others rush after hearing her screams, and Ed quickly ties a rope around his neck, which everyone pulls to choke Ralph to death. Ed gets a message that the CDC is coming, so they all gather at the door. But the CDC points guns at them, takes Niall's gun and confiscates the lab rat. They give injections to Paula and Kingston before asking everyone to step forward for the injection or they won't be allowed out. While all are hesitant, Louise steps forward, but before she can get the injection, her cat bites her neck and runs away. The CDC quickly opens fire to eliminate the cat, but Kingston becomes infected and bites one of the officers, who is quickly shot by other CDC members before the door is opened, and the uninfected officers rush out, but Ed drags one back inside. Seeing the open door, a passenger named Havorst attempts to escape, but he is killed on the spot, leaving his girlfriend Nika to mourn the loss. Suddenly, they hear noise coming from the plane and rush to the truck, realizing that they will be attacked soon. But Niall and Susan stay outside as Susan notices Niall's face changing because of the infection. They try to pull Susan in, but Niall drags her away before they close the truck's door. When the injured officer is questioned by the group in the truck, he discloses that he works for CBDT, which stands for Chemical Biological Domestic Terrorism, a division of the Department of Homeland Security that deals with chemical and biological terrorism. He confirms that the medicine is only an experimental antidote and informs them about a quarantine facility in Los Angeles that served as a lab for the group of bioterrorists before revealing that rats are the carriers. The officer claims they are never going to let them out alive and prefers death over life in this situation. Suddenly, Ed remembers there is an old drainage tunnel beneath the terminal and decides they will find it. But Wilsey appears on the roof of the truck. Henry takes the officer's gun, but it doesn't have bullets, so George pushes a button that raises the truck and crushes Wilsey. Just as they get out, Nika gets dragged by an infected and Paula comes in Jenny's path. Jenny eventually attacks Paula with a wrench, throwing her down, which causes her death. Ed takes them to the control room and orders them to search for Tunnel F, while Henry finds Niall's bag and reloads the gun. George goes through Henry's bag and he finds newspaper articles related to a doomsday cult, but Jenny doesn't listen to him. As Shyla finds the blueprint of Tunnel F, Ed figures out the way out to the terminal, but they get attacked by Niall and Susan. Henry kills them, but when he joins them, Ed finds a bite on Henry. However, George mocks that Henry would be okay because he found the antidote in his briefcase. Henry tells George to hand it over, admitting that he is part of the terrorist cell at the apartment building, who have planned a worldwide plague to cull the human population. Believing humanity is killing the Earth, Henry points the gun at Jenny, but Ed jumps in and gets shot dead. Henry injects himself with the experimental antidote and says that his friends have been helping the cause, as they informed him that the apartment building would be raided. So they helped him bring the rats to the plane and have arranged a new lab for him in Kansas City. He injects the experimental antidote directly into his eye and then kidnaps George to use him as a human shield. The two start searching for George, but Jenny is chased by an infected Preston, so she leads him to a part of the conveyor belt's machinery and kills him. Jenny then quietly sneaks past Nika and reunites with Shyla, who gives Jenny thermal goggles, revealing that she has been bitten. Shyla then sacrifices herself to buy some time for Jenny, who rushes after Henry and knocks Louise unconscious with the wrench when she attacks Jenny. Jenny reaches near Tunnel F, where she finds George, who reveals that the antidote has failed and that Henry is infected. Henry attacks them, and Jenny gets in a fight with him, asking George to run, but George eventually shoots him, and Jenny bashes in his skull until he dies. Jenny hugs George and asks him if he's okay, but just as George starts explaining, they hear an explosion, making Jenny realize they are burning the terminal to close it. Jenny manages to find the drainage and she quickly pushes George to get in there. As they crawl in, George puts on the thermal goggles and realizes that Jenny has been bitten, but she urges him to move forward. She tells him she won't be able to control herself much longer, but George cries, saying he won't leave without her. She agrees to follow him after he insists, and George escapes through the grate, but Jenny is unable to pass and tries to bite George as she succumbs to the infection, so George has no choice but to leave her behind. George removes the thermal goggles and sees the infected cat heading towards the Luxor Las Vegas hotel, hinting that all efforts to quarantine the virus had failed. That's both quarantine movies recapped. And as always, put your recommendations below, and I'll see you all on the next one.